Hi everyone, I'm Andy Clarke and I'm here to talk to you about Unity. Um, I'm the Magic Weasel on Twitter, just reach out if you have any questions. Always happy to talk about making games and Unity. I co-run a user group in Shropshire in the UK, so if you're ever in the UK, we meet monthly, so please drop in. And in the week, I work for a place called Protolabs. We do 3D printing and traditional manufacturing techniques such as injection molding and CNC machining, but we do it on a really fast time scale. So a great place to work, and thanks to Protolabs for giving me the time to come and speak to you today. But at the weekends, can be found tinkering with games, and I'm very much just a kind of hobby games developer. I'll show you a couple of my games, and you'll see the quality. So, as you can see, I'm not a professional games developer, so I hope I've not misled any of you. This is Harrier Strike that I wrote a few years ago, and that's on Windows and Android. And then Pogo Elf was my last creation, and like I say, I'm a C# developer working on business software. At the weekends, I like to turn my hand to a bit of games creation. So I'm not a professional developer, but I guess some people come to Unity from a 3D modeling background and a games background, whereas I'm coming to Unity with my C# business skills. And so hopefully I've got some insights, because some of you are probably in the same boat. So both my two previous games were written in monogame, and then monogame does support 3D graphics, and I wanted to write a 3D game, but Unity's got bigger abstractions, and it's easier to get these kind of 3D games going. So I moved over to Unity just over a year ago now. Well, probably about 18 months. So I've got about 18 months of experience with Unity. So not that much. So if you've not heard about it, you've probably played Temple Run on iOS and Android, and this was a game written in Unity years ago. And a lot of the three. This is one of the, I think it's the Shadowrun series. A lot of 3D games on Android and iOS are written using Unity. But it's moved on a lot since Temple Run, and I mean this tech demo is getting a little old now, but you can see the the graphics are a lot better. You've got kind of swaying grass and dappled light. Unity's really kind of moved on, and it's knocking on the door of kind of other engines like the Unreal Engine. And so much so, I don't know whether you've come across this guy or any of his movies, like District 9, Chappie and Elysium, but he's got his own little studio, and he puts out shorts on YouTube, some really good shorts. It's like a 10-minute one with Sigourney Weaver in. But he's actually using Unity for one of his series, and this is the Adam series, and this is rendered in real time in Unity. So we're at a point now where we can actually use it for filmmaking. And I mean, I don't know whether it was rendered in real time on my old Dell laptop, but you can see the power of the engine. And a lot of the assets, he's just dumped on the asset store. So Unity's got its own asset store. People put paid assets on there, but there's a lot of free stuff as well. And you can drag that Adam robot into your kind of demo and play around and see it. All the characters are there and some of the scenery and things. So it's all there for experimentation with the price of free on it. And Microsoft as well. If you go to Microsoft's HoloLens development page or the mixed reality development page, you'll find references to Unity. Microsoft is it's C#, so it's not a Microsoft product, but Microsoft are recommending it to get started with mixed reality apps. And so all this great software, but how much? And the great thing is, it's free. If you want to start experimenting and get a game out on the App Store, until you're ticking over $100,000, you can just have it for free. After that, it pushes it over to the 200,000. If you're making $200,000 with your game, you've probably got other problems apart from $35 a month to Unity, and then eventually you get pushed onto the pro version for $125 a month. I mean, for a business, you're going to have to just pay the licenses straight off. But for a hobby developer trying to get something going at your weekend, it's free to get started. You do have to put up with a splash screen, but if you're on the free version as well. So I'm going to just show you around the basics of Unity, the basics of the IDE, and then just kind of how to add a simple C# script and then build it up to a simple game, and then we'll get into some more complex scenarios, kind of humanoid animation and things like that. So I'm hoping you'll leave here today, be able to just kind of grab Unity and have enough to get started and kind of build your own creation. So I'll get started. Okay, so this is Unity. I've got some assets that I've added, but the ones I've left in play are what you get if you do File New. This is kind of the very start of things. So what you have is a camera. I can click on it there, and it gives a little preview of what it's seeing, and you get some directional light. So File New, you always end up with those two items. So I can look around with the right mouse button. Hopefully you can see the grid there. If I use the right mouse button, I can look around the scene. And if I push down the middle mouse button, I can move the scene around and just kind of grab it. And unsurprisingly, I can zoom in or out with the mouse wheel. And if I want to have a look at the camera, I can double click on the camera, and it'll take me to those items. So we'll add a sphere. And so this is our first object, and I can double click on the sphere and take it in. On the right hand side, you've got what are called components. So you've got a transform component, a renderer component, a sphere collider component, and you can add more components, and we'll add a few different ones in a little while. And this transform has got its position in 3D space, so I can put that at 0, 0, 0. And that's completely centered in the center of our 3D world. So you can see that both this widget up in the top right-hand corner and the sphere itself has got these green, blue, and red arrows, and these represent the axes. So you've got the green represents the y-axis, the red the x-axis, and z is your depth. So Unity uses the left-handed coordinate system. So if you kind of hold your hand like this, you've got your y-axis as your thumb, your z-axis is your finger there, and this is the x-axis. So when you're looking to rotate things around, like you're thinking, I need to rotate it around the y-axis, so you're adding value to that y-axis. So we'll get onto that in a bit. But you can use the widget up in the top right-hand corner to navigate the scene as well. So if I want to look at the scene from the top, I can just press the green. And so now I'm above. And if I want to kind of toggle around, I can just press the X and the Z and spin the scene round. So I'll add a texture, and I've just grabbed some PNGs and JPEGs off the internet. These are not special at all. And I can literally just grab the JPEG. I've got a texture of a football there onto the object, and it's applied that texture. And I can drop down if I want to. It's currently applied one piece of the texture, but if I want to tile that and add like kind of 10 lots of it, depending on what it is. Like if you're tiling a big piece of floor, you'd probably want to tile like kind of lots of them. And let's have a look where the camera can see it now. So the camera's looking at the sphere. I'll drag it a bit closer. And so if I run that now, I can build this as an exe that's kind of ready to ship. This is what the thing could do. Not very exciting. Because although we've got a visual representation of that sphere, it's not plugged into Unity's physics engine. And so to do that, I need to add another component. So if I select my sphere, go to add component here, and I'm going to add rigid body. And you'll see that it's got like mass, drag, angular drag. I'm going to leave everything just as the default settings for now, including this use gravity you can see is set to true. So if we run that, it just drops off, because the gravity's being applied. So what we'll do is we'll put something underneath it to catch it. So I'm going to add a cube, And we're going to scale this down on the y-axis to just kind of shrink it to a flat piece, and then we'll drop it down, and I'll texture that with some grass. In fact, we'll just make it a little bigger. Check the camera can see it. And so now the sphere's been caught by the cube underneath. And then by default, Unity's just put the thing that's catching it is the box collider, this component here. And so Unity's put a box collider completely over it. But I can actually move that to the side. Oh. So hopefully it's clear enough. You can see that there's the kind of green edge in there is the box collider. So now if I run the application again, the sphere will just pass through. So you can actually, by default, the collider will be matching the object, but then you can change the visual representation from the collider. So I'll move it over just to show you the opposite is true, and it's getting caught by nothing. So why would you ever want to do this? It's actually, you kind of often want to have the collider slightly more. So, I mean, if you're interacting, I want to pick up this water bottle. I don't want to wait till the water bottle's inside me before I detect it. You're interacting with other objects. You often want to put the collider a little ahead. So I'll set that back. And then I'm going to rotate it now. So if we'll tilt it this way. So I want to tilt it across that blue axis, which is the z-axis. So I'll add 10 to the z-axis there. So and then we'll take a copy of that, and I'll put -10 on the copy just to tilt it that way. Check the camera can see it. Not very well. Is that going to miss it, actually? Yeah, well, you get the idea. But so we haven't written a line of code yet. So Unity's got these big abstractions over visualization and the physics engine. So and this is what appealed to me in Monogame. I'd be writing a lot of code just to get to this point, whereas we haven't written a single piece. So I'll delete these, and I'll add another cube, and we'll just scale that out to 5, and I'm going to apply the wood texture, and we'll get this spinning around with a bit of C#. So the first thing I need to do is add a rigid body. So plug it into Unity's physics engine, and I'm going to take the use gravity off. And now I'm going to add another component, and this one is a script. So new script, and we'll call it rotate me. Okay, so by default, Unity comes with something called Mono Develop, which you can get a version of that for Linux as well. But it's really easy. You can just go into the preferences and you'll find Visual Studio there. So I've just changed it to just go for Visual Studio. So it loads up, as you'd expect, any other class. And then there's this base class called Mono Behavior, and that's used for many things. There are other ones. There's like one over the top called network behavior, and if we've got time, we'll have a look at that later in the session. So I can grab any of those components from the right hand side in Unity and kind of manipulate them in code. So I'm going to grab that rigid body. So I've got a get component which is on mono behavior, and then I can just ask for the type. So rigid body. So you've got your start method where you do any initialization, and then Unity's helpfully commented update is called once per frame. So I'm going to get the body and then add torque. So I want to rotate that piece of wood around the y-axis. So I'm going to add a value to the y-axis. So I've got vector 3, or I've got a constructor with x, y, and z. But they're basically the same thing, because if I do vector 3, that's got a constructor of x, y, z. So, but it's almost the same option. So I'm going to put 0 in for x. I'm going to put 1 in for the y-axis and 0 in for z. We'll save this and then go back to Unity. Check the camera can see the scene. And so every frame we're adding a bit more torque, so it's just going to get faster and faster. So there's some C# manipulating the scene. And if I add a couple of those, oops. They'll both be applying the same code and they'll interact. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is I'll take one of these and we'll remove that rotate script. Actually, sorry, one more thing before then. So you don't really want to be going back to the code every time you want to tweak a value. So that one there, I'd like to get it going spinning faster. I can just come in here and write 10, but then I'm going to have to come back to Visual Studio every time I want to make a change. So one of the nice things is that the two editors are pretty nicely linked. So if I put a public float here and call this speed, and then instead of using that one there, I'll just put speed. If I save that, Unity will pick that up, and then I'll be able to edit the public floats from within Unity rather than coming back each time. So you see on the script there, I've got speed now, so I can put my 10 in here. And so I'm not going to have to go back to Visual Studio each time. So this should be going faster. And you can actually tweak these while it's running. So if I put -10 in there, start spinning the other way. And so you can play around with all the values while Unity is running. And then when you stop it, it'll go back to what you had before. So it's gone back to 10. So it doesn't keep those, but it's great to kind of, and this is why you want to use those public floats, so you can actually kind of play around with the game rather than going back and kind of changing values in your code. Okay, so I was duplicating the piece of wood, and then I'll also duplicate that piece of code. So we've got rotate me. I'm going to copy that and put another class in called rotate me relative. Okay, and so the only change I'm going to make on this rotate me relative is where I've got add torque, I'm going to say add relative torque. And I'll show you the difference there. So back in Unity, on the one on the left, I'll remove that rotate me script, and then I'll drag on rotate me relative, and we'll set them both to 10. Yeah, so the one on the left's got rotate me relative. Now if I try it now, you'll see that there's no difference between them. But if I take them and I'm going to rotate them again by the z-axis, because the blue axes on the screen, we're just going to rotate them both like that. So tilt them, and now you'll see the difference. And the difference is each object has its own axes, and now we've tilted that. The y-axis is like over here, whereas the world axis is represented by that widget in the top right. So the rotate me is going to use the world axis, and the rotate me relative is going to use the axes of the objects. And so if you're adding force as well, you have the same option. So do I want to add this force or add this torque based on the world axes or the objects axes? And hopefully you'll see the difference now, because the one on the left's just spinning this way. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so we'll delete this and we'll start building a simple game. So I'll add a cube and we'll scale it down to a 0.1 to make it really thin, and we'll put it out to 100 on the X and 100 on the Z to give ourselves a nice big playing platform. And I'm going to texture that with the grass. And then I'm going to add, well, for my insanity, I'll just label that as floor. And then we'll create another object. And this, oops. And this we're going to call tank. You've got to use your imagination, I'm afraid. So, and I'll color that with a metal texture I've got. And we'll add a rigid body. And this can use gravity. Let's just check the camera can see it. So okay, we've got our tank and we can see it. And now I'll add a script. So this will be familiar from where we set up that spinning piece of wood. We've got a public float with a forward speed set to 1,000. That's just the default. You can change that in Unity. And we've got the rigid body. And then I've got in the update, I'm calling a handle movement. And then you can see straight away I'm getting this vertical input. So Unity's got this input abstraction. So I'm saying get axes vertical, and there's unsurprisingly a get axes horizontal. And this abstraction works across the cursor keys if you've got a trackball or a gamepad. So you don't have to say, oh, I've got a PlayStation 4 controller. You just say input horizontal, input vertical. And so you get this abstraction over the input devices. It also works with the cursor keys, which is going to be useful for me. So I'm getting some input from the keyboard, and then I've got this time delta time, and this is kind of really important. So like all of your calculations need this time delta time in, and what that is it's the time since we've last been in the update method. Because when Unity had its helpful comments, which I've since deleted, you're calling this, you're getting this every frame. So if you're on like kind of an old kind of Android phone versus an i7 laptop with like an NVIDIA card, you're going to get round this update loop faster than you would on that old Android phone. So you need to take into account with any calculation the time since you've last been in that update method, because otherwise you're just going to get kind of different performance. By including that, you're getting your game's going to appear the same no matter what the platform, even if you're not getting the same frame rate. So, and this is the forward speed. That's that 1,000 I've got set up here. And so I'm going to add force to the rigid body. And we've got this body transform forward, which Unity's given me. So I'm going to kind of add the force to that. And so now with the cursor keys, I can move the object back and forth. So not very easy to see. So what we can do is grab that camera, and we can just move that camera to tank, and it's now become a child of tank. So main camera is going to follow around with tank. So I can, if I up it a bit so we can see better. And you can do this with any object as well as camera, just make them children and parents of each other. So we've got the start of our game. So what I'm going to do now is I'll remove that script, and I've got a slightly more advanced one. And this one's got a turn speed as well, so you'll be even more familiar with this one, because this is what we did to the piece of wood before. So we've got the two properties, we've got a forward speed and a turn speed. We're getting the vertical axes, and we're getting the horizontal input as well. And then we're adding force, which we've just seen, and we're adding relative torque, so we're able to turn the object round now. Okay, so now a little bit nippy, but I can drive my object around the scene, and that is moving a little snappily for a tank, so I can just go in and reduce my turn speed to kind of 3000 and experiment here to get it kind of behaving a bit more how I'd like it. So anyway, the good news is we can stop using our imaginations now, because I've actually downloaded a proper tank off the asset store with my favorite price of free. This one was, and there are a lot of kind of really good free textures and free models on the asset store. So it's the same deal. Like, as far as Unity is concerned, I've put a box collider around it, which I don't know whether you can see. So as far as Unity is concerned, I am just still driving that block around the screen. But I'll move the camera over to tank, delete tank, and then we'll just add that same script to this. So it's exactly the same. It's just that now we've actually got a model, but nothing's changed code-wise. Okay. So the whoops. the right. So let's get it firing at something. So I'll remove that movement script, and I've got another one with a debug fire. I'll just quickly show you the script, but not a lot has changed since the last one. The only thing is that I've got on the update, I've got input get key space, and then we're going to debug log fire. So I just want to demonstrate something to you. So debug log, you've got a console there. So next to project, there's another tab there with console. It's actually complaining about a couple of things. So if I press space now, you see that a load of logs have been made, because we're whipping through this update at like 60 frames per second. So even at the tiniest tap on the space bar is being registered multiple times. And I just wanted to show you that, because it's straight away we've got some complexity here. Like, kind of, we've just taken some input, but we don't want to kind of fire like multiple times, like in 60 frames per second. We probably don't want that fire rate. So straight away we've got some code we need to write to just manage that fire rate, like kind of how many times are we going to fire per second and things like that. So I'll remove that, and we'll just move on to our next script. And then you see I've got a fire rate now, and that fire rate's set to 1. It's just kind of how many times do you want to fire per second. And I'll quickly show you this. So we've got forward speed, turn speed, fire rate, and then I've moved it over to a handle weapons. We've got the handle movement, handle weapons, how many milliseconds since we've last fired, and if it's greater than 0, we're going to count down, and then if we haven't fired in a second, then we're able to fire again. So it's there's nothing here that's going to surprise you, but then we can I've put some logging in the console, so now when we like kind of fire, we can say since last fire, and it's kind of counting down to a point we can fire again. So we've just handled that fire rate. So now we actually need to fire something. So I'll remove this component, and we'll go on to the final one in this game. And we've got a concept of prefabs now, and so prefabs are anything. I can you can combine objects and pieces of code and turn them into what's called a prefab. So if I grab a cube there, that piece of wood that we had before, I could have turned into a prefab. You grab it, apply a texture, I could apply some code, and then it's as simple as if you drag that down to your assets. If I just drag that down, you see the cube's actually got that texture on now. So when I drag it out, it's already got the texture if I'd applied a script. So that's what's called a prefab. So I could turn this tank into a prefab. But what I want to do is fire a bullet, and so I've put a bullet prefab on here, and I've created one rather than you watch me like kind of make a tiny sphere and add a rigid body. I've made one of those earlier, so I've got bullet here. So I'm just going to drag bullet over to the field there, and that's enough. Like now, Unity's got a reference to that prefab, so I can control that in the code. And the other thing I've got there is bullet velocity, so we'll have a look at the code in that. And then I've got a shoot point as another game object. And when we've been creating things like spheres and everything, at their base they've got a point in 3D space. So if you go to create empty, this just gives you a point in 3D space. That's kind of the lowest rung. It's just like there's nothing there other than a point in 3D space, and that's what we're going to use for the shoot point. Basically, at the tip of the tank's muzzle, rather than watch me fiddle around with it, I've put just a position there, an empty position just at the end, and that's where I'm going to instantiate my bullets from. So I'm going to drag that shoot point over as well. So now Unity's got a reference to that. So this is my my script. So we'll go and have a look at that now. So ignoring all these bits which we've looked at before, we've got the bullet prefab, which is a game object, similar to just kind of objects in C#. You've got game objects as the base, and the shoot point's also a game object. So what I'm doing now is when I'm firing, I've got this instantiate method that's on mono behavior, and I'm saying instantiate one of these, and that's a reference that we've set up in Unity to that bullet prefab, and I'm also using the shoot point that we put at the end of the muzzle to instantiate it there. We're going to put an object there, and then I'm going to grab the rigid body of it. And this is the same thing we used to spin things around in the earlier demo. And then I'm going to kind of add some velocity to it. And then just so we don't have loads of bullets kind of hanging around, after 10 seconds, I'm going to destroy that object, just so it's no longer in my scene. Actually, you can't see anything from there. I'll move the camera. Okay, so now if I press space, you'll see that the bullet's coming up. Velocity could probably do with a little tweak there. So we'll go to tank, and I'll put my velocity up from 10 to 100. And now they're coming out at a better rate. So let's give ourselves something to shoot. So I'll create a cube, and we'll just, oh, there's already one there. Create a cube, and we'll just scale this up. Oops, not that way. And not that high. There we go. And we'll give these the metal texture. I'll add a rigid body, so it's plugged into Unity's physics engine, and then we'll copy. So we've got 3 of them. Oh, I've put it right on the tank. Yay. Okay, so now I can point it. Oh, the velocity is still really low, sorry. Bullet velocity, 100. Now we should be able to shoot these things. Yeah. So now, like, that's all very well, but let's kind of get it looking a little fancier with some sound and explosions. So that bullet prefab, I'll drag that out. And if you want to adjust a prefab, you can just drag it into your scene, and then alter it. And this thing up at the top, I've not actually changed bullet at this point, but you can just override it. So you drag the prefab out, make any changes you want, and then you can say override, apply to all, and then you just delete the prefab you were playing with, and it's updated it in assets. So it's really easy to just drag something in the scene, edit it, and then apply it. So Bullet's got its own piece of code. So if I select Bullet here, and then Bullet's got an explosion WAV and an explosion, and the explosion I just grabbed off Unity's asset store. I think it was one actually produced by Unity. Unity have some packs on there, so and one of them was an explosion pack with loads of stuff in. So I just grabbed it out of there, all free. So I'm dragging that into there, and then I've got a WAV, just a standard WAV that I found on the internet, and I've pulled that into explosion WAV. And the other thing to note on here is you've got the audio source. So like you've got a 3D game and you've got your kind of surround sound setup. You want it sounding like the explosion's happening at the place where it's happening in the game. And so this audio source will give you that. It'll give you the position in 3D space, so you don't have to worry about it. You're just saying, if you're on stereo headphones, play the source is over here, you'll hear it in your left speaker. Okay, so I've made my changes. So now I'm going to go overrides, apply to all, and then I can just delete this one. And we'll just before we start, we'll just have a little look at the bullet code. And so you've got these public things that we're already familiar with. But then this was the WAV, which is coming as an audio clip, and then we've got game object explosion. So the tank has got a shoot point. It's instantiating the bullet at that shoot point and then adding the velocity. When the bullet collides with something, we've got this on collision enter. We're going to play the WAV. So that's that audio source, the position in 3D space. We're going to play the WAV at that point. And then I'm going to instantiate, so this is the same code we used for the tank to instantiate the bullet. We're going to instantiate the explosion. And just at the point where it's hit something. And then because we don't need this like lying around, the explosion lasts for about 4 seconds. So I'm going to kill the game object and kill the explosion after 4 seconds. So let's see this in action. And just like any other object in Unity, we can play around with the with this. Here's the explosion, and like I don't really know what I'm doing with any of this kind of stuff, but I know size, so I like bigger things. So start size 5, end size 10, and then that should that's a bit better, a bit more dramatic. So hopefully you can see like you can grab bits off the store and manipulate them quite easily. Right, so we'll delete tank now, and we'll get onto some get onto the next part of the demo. I've just accidentally deleted the camera, but that's fine. You can just right click like anything else. There's a camera there. It's probably put it somewhere a little funny. I accidentally closed the scene tab, and I don't know how to get it back. I apologize. I'm just restarting it. I'm sure it's just there under less stressful circumstances. I've probably just seen it in about 1 second, but because I'm sure there's a window scene tab somewhere. But rather than watch me, there we go. Well, I know where it is in the menu now. Okay, so let's put that floor back in. And add our grass texture. And what I wanted to show you now was some humanoid. And then I went on the asset store and dragged down a couple of prefabs. So I found this robot, and what was the other one? This combat character pack. So I added a variety of soldiers. Spinning round. Let's see where the camera is. Can the camera see it? Okay, so we've got a robot and a soldier, and they came with some animation just from the asset store. So if I run the scene, hopefully you can see this now, and the soldier is got a kind of idle motion. You see, kind of mops his brow every few seconds. And I guess the robot's a bit more of an amateur production. Someone's like put him together, and but they've given him a load of animations, and often what you'll find is these packs on the asset store, like kind of, I think there was an advanced soldier pack with a ton of animations, but the free version, which is my favourite pricing, only came with that idle. But the great thing is you can actually transfer the animations. So now if I select this object, you've got this animator here, and there's a kind of a Visio style interface. And you can control this in code just like any other aspect of Unity. And you can see they're just demoing the various pieces. They're just all strung together. So if we delete everything but walk, and then just run that, it only does one frame because you'll often be controlling it in code. Like if I'm walking forward, keep playing the frame. But for our uses, I'll just search for that animation. So it's called walk. And then in the inspector, there's a loop time. And you can also see this the animation of it outside the model. So just show you that working quickly. So now the robot's walking, and I can just go onto the robot, go onto the animator, and then copy this, select the soldier, and then paste that in, and then I'll delete his idle, and I'll put it to the walk. So now the soldier model that was all like a little fancier, we've got him using the walk animation, and as well as the assets, I just wanted to show you this because it's really cool. There's an open source program called Make Human, and this allows you to kind of easily make and model your own characters. And there's a big community by it. It's all completely free, and these are the things you might expect. You kind of got age there, and gender. And you can kind of tweak this, like kind of muscle values and things like this, as much as you want. And there's clothes as well. So and there's a big community just making clothes. So this is a bodyguard. Actually, you want to? Yes, I've been working on for the game I'm making. And just to kind of show you, there's like kind of you can change the skin color here, so I can make him African or Caucasian, and then there's various kind of clothes and things that you can alter. So if we don't want him in the suit there, we can take that out and give him, I don't know, that thing, work suit, and we'll give him a bob. And then now I can just export this straight into Unity. So FBX Unity will take. So I'll export this. I think I've got it. You probably can't see it at the bottom there, but I've got it pointed at the same directory I'm using in Unity. And now Unity's picked it up and is just importing it for me. They don't go in perfectly, but it's very easy to like just kind of sort them out. So there he is with his bob, and if you look closely, like the eyes are particularly sinister. They're just kind of white because it hasn't applied the texture to it, but the textures are in a directory. So if I select the eyes, I can just drag them on. There you go. Now he's got his eyes back. So and the same with some of this kind of skin tones as well. You can sometimes drag them on, but very easy, free software to make your own. He hasn't got a skeleton in Unity yet. So if we select him here, you see that we've got rig over in the right here. I'm going to change it to humanoid, and then you see there's a create from model, which I'm going to apply. And now Unity is going to add a skeleton rig to this model. And I can configure it and tweak it. And you can kind of alter various aspects of it. If I so I can check all his skeletons like kind of working correctly, because everyone needs to be able to do that, yeah? And then when I'm happy, I've gone with the default settings. So, and now the only other thing I need to do is he hasn't got an animation controller, and just like everything else, I can just create animation controller, and select my bodyguard, and I'm just going to drag on the controller, select the robot, go to his animator, grab that walk, select my bodyguard, paste that in. Okay, so now this guy in the middle, we've given him a skeleton and we've applied an animation we've got elsewhere off the internet. And that Make Human you probably saw is like infinitely customizable. So now you can make your whole army of characters for your game without reusing anything off the asset store. So you can make it just completely unique to yourself. Okay, so delete soldier, delete the robot, and we'll start adding some C# to our character. So this is just some very basic movement scripts, and you'll remember input get axes horizontal and get axes vertical, but the difference here is I'm just using rotate and translate, so I'm not adding force or adding torque. I'm just saying do these things. So that's another option for kind of movement rather than kind of play into the physics thing. You can just actually kind of rotate it or move it. Okay, so there we go. That was 4 lines of code, yeah. So and it's a reasonably realistic kind of character we've got now, and we can well, if you see a kind of workman with a bob like this, but I can take the camera and we can do exactly the same we did to the tank, and we'll just position it over his shoulder. So. Okay, so now the camera is a child of the character, so he can kind of walk around, and I want to get him to grab something now. So we'll add a cylinder, and we'll just scale this down to something he might likely be able to grab. So I'll scale it on the X and the Z, and then we'll give it a texture. And the other thing I'm going to do, actually, so we'll give that a rigid body, but we'll turn gravity off, and then we need to add a collider to our bodyguard. So add box collider so we can detect things. And this is like right at the start we were talking about. Sometimes you want to have your colliders different to your objects. So hopefully you can see the collider's by his feet at the moment. So I'm just going to kind of raise that up. So it's around his torso now. So anything in that box I should be able to detect. And I'll remove that component. And we've got another one here. With some collision detection in. How long do I have, please? 5 minutes. Okay, thanks. Okay, so we've got the 4 lines of code that we're controlling his movement, And now all I've got is this on trigger enter, and I'm just going to log to the console the name of the game object. And I think it's got a default name of cylinder. So what we're hoping to do is, like, when we're in a kind of collision, we're in that collision zone, we should see it in the console. And the one thing I forgot is that I just need to mark that, I think it's the cylinder is trigger. So hopefully you can see that as he approaches the cylinder, we're logging in the console. So now we've got to actually make a grab for it. And so this is where things get a little complicated, because we've got that animation running. So there's an animation kind of getting him along. We've got to kind of stop the animation, but only on the right hand, and kind of move it to grab the cylinder. And the first thing I want to do is actually create a grab point, because like we don't want him just trying to grab into the center of the object. We'll give him somewhere to grab, like you'd actually hold something. So I'm going to create an empty game object off cylinder, and then we'll put that somewhere he might grab it. Yeah, okay. I'll remove that component and we'll just go on to the next one. I'll just show you through that. And so we've got this thing called inverse kinematics, and this is how we're going to stop the animation, because the animation's based on that skeleton, the skeleton we added to the bodyguard there. And there's an enum here with all the pieces of that skeleton, right hand, right leg, all the pieces. So we can say, and this is some awful code here. So as we enter the collider with that cylinder, I'm assuming that it's got a child, which is that grab point I've just put on. So this code would fail if there was no grab point there. It's assuming there's a child, and that's the point I've put to grab onto it. So we're setting the grab point, and if the grab point's not equal to null, then we're going to move the right hand to the grab point. And the one thing I need to do is, like, there's a few bits in Unity where you actually have to just tell it to run these sections of code. So it's the same on this. This is part of the animation, because we're stopping animation to do the grab. And there's IK pass. And if we do the IK pass, it'll allow us to run the IK methods. Okay. So, yeah, realistic, yeah. And so part of the problem here is the grab point's slightly funny. So I can just show you that. If I go to the grab point here, and we can alter that around, I think, hopefully you can see his hands like turning. And then you can alter that to like kind of make it more natural. But part of the problem is he's grabbing for it, but it's not moving. So just as we like made that camera parent of the tag and the camera parent of this guy here, we can do that in code. And so if I go back and remove that script, and we'll just have a look. So there's only one line change from the previous, and we're just setting the transform parent of the cylinder to the transform of the object, which is the bodyguard. So we're just doing what we did on the left hand side when we dragged like the camera in. We're just doing that in code, setting up the parent-child relationship. And so now I can like pick it up and take it around. So I hate to think how he's actually grabbed that, but luckily you guys can't see. So where am I with time? I've probably. Okay, I was hoping to. So the next part of the demo is that we can change mono behavior to network behavior, and with a couple of lines of code, get 2 instances running, and then like kind of pass the cylinder time. Unfortunately, that's about 5 minutes. So I think I've run out of time. So I'm afraid that's it. I've got 1 minute for questions then, if anyone's got one. Okay, I think we're done. Thank you.